I never thought my quiet suburban neighborhood would turn into the kind of story people binge listen to on YouTube, but all it took was one HOA president, one visible firearm, and 42 seconds that changed everything. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 36, work in IT security, and live with my wife, Emily, in a planned community just outside of Phoenix, Arizona. You know the type: identical houses, trimmed lawns, fake palm trees, and an HOA board that takes their power way too seriously. Emily and I moved there 3 years ago. No kids yet. Just us, a golden retriever named Max, and what we thought would be a peaceful place to live. Emily is calm, quiet, and polite to everyone. She's also someone you don't mess with, but you would know that by looking at her. She's 5'6", athletic, always carries herself professionally, and never raises her voice. What most people in the neighborhood didn't know, because it wasn't their business, was that Emily was a law enforcement officer. She'd been on the force for over 10 years. She carried a firearm legally, trained constantly, and followed procedure like it was hardwired into her brain. She didn't show it off. She didn't talk about her job. She just lived her life. Unfortunately, Karen lived 2 houses down. Her real name was Linda Watkins, but from day one, everyone called her that Karen behind her back. Mid-50s. Blonde bob haircut. Sunglasses even at night. Always walking around with a clipboard like she was on patrol. She was the HOA president. And she loved that title more than anything. She once fined a neighbor for having a trash can visible for 11 minutes past pickup time. She sent us a warning letter because our dog barked once at a squirrel. So when things went down, I honestly shouldn't have been surprised. It was a Saturday morning. Clear sky. About 9 a.m. Emily and I were heading out for coffee. She had just come off a long shift and wanted something normal: latte, pastry, 10 minutes of peace. She was wearing jeans, a fitted hoodie, and her concealed holster. As usual. But that morning, her jacket rode up slightly as she bent down to tie her shoe. The grip of her handgun became visible for maybe 2 seconds. That's all it took. "Excuse me." Karen's voice cut through the air like a car alarm. I looked up and saw her power walking across her driveway toward us, phone already in her hand. "Why do you have a gun?" she demanded, loud enough for half the street to hear. Emily straightened up calmly. "Good morning." "I asked you a question," Karen snapped. "This is a family neighborhood." Emily remained polite. "Ma'am, I'm legally allowed to carry." Karen's eyes widened like she'd just discovered a bomb. "That's not allowed here. The HOA does not allow weapons." I stepped in. "Actually, HOA rules don't override state law." Karen ignored me completely. "I'm calling the police. You're threatening the community." Emily didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even look annoyed. She just said, "You're free to do that." That seemed to anger Karen even more. She backed away dramatically, dialing 911 like she was escaping a crime scene. "Yes, hello? There's a woman with a gun walking around my neighborhood." Neighbors began peeking out from behind curtains. Garage doors paused mid-open. Phones came out. Emily quietly adjusted her jacket, so the firearm was no longer visible, and stood still, hands relaxed at her sides. I leaned toward her. "You okay?" She nodded. "This won't take long." That's when I knew something Karen didn't. And 42 seconds later, everything changed. Karen stayed on the phone with 911 like she was narrating a disaster movie. "She's still standing there," she said loudly, pacing in small circles. "Yes, I can see the weapon." "No, I don't feel safe. This is an HOA-controlled neighborhood." Emily didn't move. She didn't argue. She didn't try to explain herself to the crowd forming around us. That's something I learned about her early in our marriage. When you're in the right, you don't need to perform. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars rolled into the street, lights flashing but no sirens. The neighborhood went silent in that eerie way it does when something official happens. Karen's face lit up with satisfaction. "Oh, thank God," she said, hanging up and marching toward the arriving officers like she was greeting reinforcements. The first officer stepped out, a tall guy, mid-30s, calm expression. His partner followed, scanning the area. Karen started talking before either of them could even shut their doors. That's her, Karen said, pointing aggressively at Emily. She's armed, just walking around like she owns the place. This is a violation of HOA policy, and I want her removed immediately. The officer raised a hand gently. Ma'am, we'll handle it. He turned toward Emily and me. Morning, he said professionally. We got a call about a firearm. Emily nodded once. Yes, sir. Are you carrying today? Yes. Is it concealed? Yes. Do you have a permit? Emily paused just for a fraction of a second. I'm exempt under state law, she said calmly. That caught his attention. All right, he said, tone neutral but more alert now. I'm going to need you to keep your hands visible while we talk. Emily slowly raised her hands to chest level, fingers relaxed. Karen smirked. I could practically hear her internal monologue, gotcha. The second officer stepped closer. Ma'am, are you law enforcement? Emily didn't answer immediately. Instead, she said, May I retrieve my credentials? The officer nodded. Slowly. Emily reached into her back pocket and pulled out a leather wallet, opening it so the badge was clearly visible from a distance. The effect was instant. Both officers froze. Then their posture changed subtly, but unmistakably. Yes, ma'am, the first officer said, his tone shifting to respectful recognition. Karen blinked. Wait, what? Emily held the badge steady. Detective Emily Carter. Phoenix P. There was a pause. Not an awkward one. A heavy one. The second officer straightened fully and gave a crisp nod. The first officer did the same. And then something Karen absolutely did not expect. They saluted. 42 seconds after stepping out of their car, the entire power dynamic flipped. Karen's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. She can't just, Karen stammered. She scared me. She had a gun. Yes, ma'am, the officer said calmly, not even looking at her now. She's allowed to. Emily lowered her hands. I was off duty and on my way out for coffee. The first officer nodded. Understood, detective. Karen's face turned red. But the HOA rules don't supersede state law, the officer said firmly. And they definitely don't apply to law enforcement officers carrying legally. Karen looked around, hoping someone would back her up. No one did. One neighbor actually coughed to hide a laugh. Karen tried again. She didn't tell me she was a cop. Emily finally looked directly at her. I don't owe you that information. Silence. The officers asked Emily a few standard questions, purely procedural, and then turned back to Karen. Ma'am, the second officer said, calling 911 for a non-crime can be considered misuse of emergency services. Karen's confidence evaporated. I was just protecting the neighborhood, she said weakly. You're free to file a formal complaint, the first officer said. But there is no violation here. They turned back to Emily. Stay safe, one of them said quietly. Emily nodded. Always. As the patrol cars pulled away, the neighbors dispersed, buzzing with whispers. Karen stood there alone, clipboard clutched like a life raft. I looked at Emily and exhaled. Coffee. She smiled slightly. Definitely. But we weren't done with Karen. By the time we got back from coffee, the neighborhood had already chosen sides. And Karen hated that. As Emily and I walked back up our driveway, I noticed something taped to our front door. White paper. Official looking.
Hoa letterhead.
Emily sighed before I even read it. Let me guess, she said. Violation notice.
Bingo.
I laughed. Out loud. This woman really doesn't learn, I said. Emily didn't laugh. She read the letter carefully, then folded it once. She's escalating, she said. That's a mistake. I knew that tone.
Calm.
Controlled. Surgical. Emily didn't get angry. She got precise. That night, Emily pulled out her laptop and logged into the HOA portal. She downloaded every document, bylaws, amendments, enforcement procedures, complaint protocols. She also pulled out her phone and made one quiet call. The next morning, Karen went full Karen. In it, she described a dangerous incident involving a resident openly carrying a firearm, framed herself as the hero who intervened and urged residents to remain vigilant. She didn't name Emily, but everyone knew. Emily read the email once. Then she forwarded it to her department's legal unit. By noon, the situation had gone from annoying to professional. 2 days later, Emily received an email from the HOA's legal counsel. They wanted a meeting. Karen wanted a meeting. She wanted control back. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at the community clubhouse. Emily and I arrived 10 minutes early. Karen was already there pacing, clipboard in hand. Of course, 3 HOA board members sat at the long table. All looked uncomfortable. The HOA lawyer, middle-aged, tired eyes, stood when we entered. "Thank you for coming," he said politely. Karen didn't say hello. She didn't look at Emily. She just started talking. "This is about safety," she said sharply.
People were frightened.
"We have rules for a reason." The lawyer raised a hand. "Linda, let's proceed properly." Emily sat down calmly and placed a folder on the table. Inside were printed state statutes, department policy excerpts, and a copy of Karen's email. Karen noticed it and stiffened. Emily spoke for the first time. "I was carrying legally," she said. "I was not brandishing. I was not threatening anyone. And your fine is unenforceable." The lawyer nodded slowly. "That is correct." Karen snapped her head toward him. "What?" "Arizona law preempts HOA regulation on firearm possession," he said. "And law enforcement officers are additionally protected." Karen's voice rose. "So, we just let people walk around with guns?" "You already do," Emily said. "You just didn't notice." That landed. One board member cleared his throat. "We've also been advised that the mass email may constitute harassment." Karen looked around the table. "You're all against me?" "No," the lawyer said carefully. "We're trying to prevent a lawsuit." That word, lawsuit, finally got her attention. Emily slid one last document forward. "This is a formal demand to withdraw the fine," she said. "Issue a written apology and cease further harassment." Karen's face drained of color. "And if we don't?" she asked. Emily met her eyes. "Then this becomes a legal matter." Silence filled the room. Karen broke it. "This isn't over," she hissed. Emily stood. "It is." But Karen had one more move left. And it was her worst one yet. Karen didn't back down. She doubled down. 2 days after the meeting, Emily's department received a formal civilian complaint. Karen accused Emily of abuse of authority, brandishing a firearm, intimidation of residents. Emily wasn't surprised. "I figured she'd try this," she said calmly as she read the notice. What Karen didn't understand was that filing a false complaint against a law enforcement officer doesn't create pressure. It creates paper trails. And paper trails are dangerous when you're lying. Emily immediately reported the complaint herself, exactly as procedure required. Body cam footage from the responding officers was pulled. 911 audio was requested. Statements were logged. Within 48 hours, Internal Affairs cleared Emily.
No violation. No misconduct.
No further action. But Karen wasn't done humiliating herself. She began knocking on doors, trying to gather signatures to remove Emily from the community for endangering residents. Most neighbors shut the door. One neighbor, a retired Marine, told her flat out, "You're out of line." Another told her, "Maybe stop calling the cops on your neighbors." Then Karen crossed a line. One afternoon, Emily came home to find a note taped to our garage. Emily stared at it for a long moment. Then she took a photo, logged it, bagged it, and reported it. That's when things stopped being civil and started being criminal. A detective, Emily's colleague, interviewed Karen. Karen claimed it wasn't a threat. "It was just a suggestion," she said. The detective didn't smile. They pulled handwriting samples. They pulled HOA email logs. They pulled security camera footage from a neighbor across the street. Karen had been caught on camera walking up to our garage at 2:14 p.m. That evening, a patrol car pulled into Karen's driveway. Neighbors watched from their windows as officers spoke with her on the porch. Her voice was loud, defensive, shrill. Turns out, When the HOA lawyer realized Karen's actions could expose the association to liability, the board acted fast. Very fast. Karen lost her title, her power,
Her clipboard.
but karma wasn't finished. The city charged her with filing a false police report harassment, making a threatening communication. She accepted a plea deal, probation, mandatory anger management, and a court order to stay away from Emily. The apology letter came a week later. It was short, forced, and legally required. Emily read it once and shredded it. Life slowly returned to normal. Neighbors smiled again. The HOA stayed very, very quiet. And Karen? She moved out 6 months later. House sold.
No goodbye.
No farewell email.
Just gone.
Emily and I still get coffee every Saturday morning. She still carries. And every time I see a clipboard, I smile. Because 42 seconds was all it took to expose the difference between authority and ego.